Certainty for all presidents eventually yields to reality. Presidents campaign certain they can do things their way. That certitude is essential to the confidence that makes for a solid president. That certainty can be based on experience, analysis, hunches, or gumption. All important characteristics for presidents to call upon. But sometimes that certainty is less rooted, more fanciful, close to wishful thinking. Which brings us to President Trump, Russia's Vladimir Putin, and the war in Ukraine. You already know that Trump didn't end the war before he took office, as he promised. You already know Trump disdained Ukrainian President Zelensky. That Oval Office blow-up with Vice President J.D. Vance playing Trump's tag team partner was essentially a made-for-TV diplomatic dumpster fire. But what has been percolating beneath the surface and came into full public view only today was Trump yielding to reality, the reality that Putin is unserious about peace and deadly serious about war. For the first time, Trump is greenlighting new weapons shipments to Ukraine through the coffers of the European nations and delivered via NATO. That's the process side. The policy side, the much more important side, is Trump is now declaring Ukraine a courageous place that deserves protecting, something Europeans and the Biden administration said from the start of this war, but that Trump, until just now, brushed aside. There was even today a whiff of a threat of economic war between the U.S. and Russia, the kind of war that stalwart U.S. allies have been contending with for months. For more on this sea change, we turn to Nancy Cordes at the White House. Now, Nancy, you and I know there are all these fussy TV rules. Don't play sound from one day and another. I'm going to do that anyway. I'm going to break all the conventions, sound from our president today, and sound from his ally in the Senate, Lindsey Graham, from Face the Nation yesterday. Let's listen to those both, and I'll get your reaction.
It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. It's not my war. I'm trying to get you out of it. And we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there.
A turning point regarding Russia invasion of Ukraine is coming. For months, President Trump has tried to entice Putin to the peace table. He's put tariffs against countries that allow fentanyl to come in our country, other bad behavior. He's left the door open regarding Russia. That door is about to close.
Nancy, we are in a new place, it sounds like.
Absolutely, Major. I mean, the fact that the president is now firmly in Ukraine's corner is something that was not a given just a few months ago when we all saw that blow up between President Trump and Ukraine's president in the Oval Office, or when President Trump said that both sides, Ukraine and Russia, were equally responsible for this war. That put him at odds, not just with Democrats in Congress, but with Republicans in Congress, like Lindsey Graham. And those Republicans, especially Republican leaders, are very heartened to see that the president is now moving in their direction, both when it comes to sending weapons to Ukraine and establishing a more permanent mechanism for those weapons to be paid for via Europe, but also the fact that he is open now to tariffs and sanctions on countries that buy Russian oil and gas because that oil and gas money is used to fund Russia's war.
There's a 50-day timetable on that second part of what you just outlined so well for us, Nancy. So 50 days for the Russians to, quote unquote, come around. And if not, those secondary sanctions may become real.
Right. Because the president does still want to see some kind of peace deal. He does still want to, if he can, entice Russia to the negotiating table. He still believes, as many do, that that's the only way out of this war is some kind of negotiated settlement. And so now the clock begins to tick on those 50 days. And basically what the White House is trying to do here is to make it more financially unpalatable for countries like China and India and Brazil to purchase oil and gas from Russia, to make them understand that they're going to pay a heavy price for that. Because if they stop purchasing that energy, the White House believes that will be a powerful enticement for Russia to come back to the negotiating table because one of its most reliable sources of funding will dry up.
Even so, today in Moscow, those I saw quoted shrugged this off because they heard, as we all did, a major announcement. That's what President Trump said on this question. Moscow didn't seem to take it all that seriously.
Right, because by every indication, President Putin is determined to continue to carry out this invasion of Ukraine. Trump has not been able to entice him to the negotiating table so far. And as one insider described it to me today, Putin could pay a heavy price if he does now look like he is capitulating to the United States. But the news was very well received in Ukraine, where they were worried that perhaps U.S. interest in continuing to provide military aid was going to dry up after the U.S. has spent some $130 billion for weaponry and humanitarian aid over the past 3.5 years. That is not an unfounded concern, as you well know. There are a lot of conservatives in particular who question the price tag. And what this arrangement means is that European countries that have a vested interest in protecting Ukraine, they're much closer to that Russian border, they will now be the ones paying for U.S. weaponry to get into Ukraine.
Nancy Cordes, thank you so very much. Always a pleasure. Appreciate it from the North Lawn.